Let me try and see.
Okay, I just activated it. I'm a co-host,
Oh.
so I will,
Alright.
which I've never done before, but I used to have an old computer and I knew that I couldn't actually record it onto my old computer.
Yep. So do you want to start, Mary Jo, or take us away, or how do you want to approach this?
Well, I wasn't going to be the facilitator. I don't know if someone else is going to come back, but I think we're ready to start. So yes, indeed, let's get underway. I want to thank you both for your, for the presentations here. And this is basically not for continuing presentations by the speakers, but for all of you here to ask the questions that you didn't get time to do during the session itself. So please use your hand raising function and I will call on you. And maybe, I don't know, does it make more logic to start with just questioning Pazita at the beginning so that we get all of the hub and spoke stuff out of the way? And then when we've exhausted all the hub and spokes questions, we'll go over to the DC collaboration, but we can swing back and forth after that. But let's see if we can surface the Montgomery County questions just first. So any of you there have some questions that you'd like to pursue? Well,
I do.
okay.
Well, I don't know how far thinking about this could already be, but
And could you identify your village?
oh, sorry, Silver Spring.
Good.
See you, Claire.
What is the thinking about fundraising? Does this mean funds would come to the central place and be divided up, or what?
Yes. So the idea is when you have a hub, the two main advantages for fundraising is that you have dedicated staff that can actually spend the time just on fundraising, which would include both grant writing as well as organizing other fundraising activity with cultivating donors or perhaps organizing fundraising events or letter campaigns. The distribution of funds varies hub to hub. The idea would be less in terms of, okay, it would be more functionally driven. If the hub that we are going to set up would essentially do most of the activities which cost money, and the villages themselves would not have that many expenses because everything gets done on the hub, then it would make sense for the funds to remain within the hub, since that's where most of the cost would go to. Some hubs and spoke have different arrangements, whereby a hub simply determines cost for being a part of a village, and then a village can do whatever fundraising they want above and beyond that, and that remains at their discretion. So there are many ways of approaching this, and we are not yet at the point where we are committing to any kind of model, because we still haven't reached an agreement on the degree to which the hub is going to be sort of robustly providing all these things. Actually, I'm currently talking to the Lawton Community Center. We're going to convene a group of villages to present some of the thought process that the writing group is struggling with, so that we can get more input from villages who want to participate. Kind of a long-winded way of saying, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I can see advantages for some grant writing, and if there's funds for services that help all the villages, like managing websites or whatever it is. But I think it gets very tricky when a lot of our fundraising, and I guess everybody else's, is donations from individual members who just want to show their appreciation, or villages that have rent and some don't, and some, all that kind of stuff.
So I think the biggest obstacle I think we have is not logistic, but psychological. Psychological, I mean, is the village's sense of identity and how they do things, and the challenge of transforming the way you do things. In my vision, the sense of belonging and sense of appreciation for a village shouldn't make a difference into which pocket these funds go to. It's not as though a hub is a separate entity from the village. Hub and spoke really means it's kind of a more integrated way of doing things. And it's not an us versus them. It's my money, it's your money, it's our money, and how do we use our funds in the most effective way? So if a member donates funds and the needs are currently for the hub to pay for staff, which then supports the village, then the member shouldn't care if it goes to the pocket that calls line item Silver Spring or hub activity, because it supports the same thing. And that's why I'm thinking of it as a psychological perception of like, oh, who gets the money?
Susan Decker, I think, had her hand up. Maybe she,
Yep.
Are you going to build on that question?
Yeah, I'm also with Silver Spring Village. I do agree the psychological is part of it, but I guess the other thing I'm struggling with is that we have such a broad range of villages at the level of maturity in which they are.
Yep.
I almost wonder if you're almost talking more about an incubator type hub and spoke,
No.
because I'm struggling with, the biggest, I think we're a little further along the spectrum. So I know for us, the biggest issue has been, we've been wanting to have a shared social worker, but I don't see that actually even in the charts. From what I gather, you're really talking more about just kind of back office stuff. So
Yes, so definitely.
and our programming is very robust as well, which we do spend money on. So I struggle with how it would work with an incubator type village and one that maybe is a little bit more along the chain.
My answer is this: no village needs to join if that doesn't work for them. I don't expect all 30 villages to join this hub and spoke. So we're not doing this and saying, hey, all Montgomery County villages now need to do things differently. This needs to be something that the village is interested in. So that's really important that I put out there. If Silver Spring is happy and everything goes well, power to you. Please proceed at your current track. The way of hub and spoke could potentially benefit everybody is a little bit of what I will say the communist way. We're thinking a lot about equity and where some villages struggle and how we can all as a village community support one another and help make sure that everybody gets their needs met. And so when I speak to other hub and spoke, they really are committed to this concept of creating a robust central entity that can support anybody at the level that they need. So, for example, there are some villages I was talking to John Powers at Marine Villages, and I asked him about fundraising. And I said, well, he said the hub is responsible for fundraising. Some villages are really keen on it and are really good about fundraising and they just do it. Others don't have the capacity. That's fine. Some villages need more of my time and I give it to them. Others need less of my time, then they get less. It's fine. Some villages just received a bequest from a donor and they just gave it to the hub. That's awesome, because it's not that sort of constant us versus, that's the separation that I think is psychological. Like, okay, how do we manage this in a way that preserves things for us? But again, Sue, I want to emphasize, I really think Silver Spring Village is not interested. And so I do not wish to appease your concerns at this point. It's fine. I'll answer your questions, but please don't feel compelled to then join in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, can we let
I just want to make clear, it's not an us versus them. I'm actually looking for a reason to be, because in my mind, if we all float up, it's better for everybody.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's where my questions are coming
Then
from. I'm trying
perhaps
to understand.
If you
Elizabeth, how about let's let
I'll let
Elizabeth.
Elizabeth, and then I'll get back to Sue.
Yeah, I'm with Bethesda Metro Area Village, and whether or not we end up participating, I think this is so important and is really the future of the village movement everywhere. I mean, we all across the country deal with sustainability in different ways. And I think it's super important and definitely support it. I'm along the same lines. I'm wondering about, there are many successful villages that have structures that don't charge fees.
Yep.
So of course, as you said, they may not end up joining. I mean, maybe that doesn't work for them, but what is the thought? Like, how can we grapple with some villages charge fees here, some don't have any? Like, I know that the answer is probably we don't know yet, but is there any idea for how that would be massaged?
I think that villages that do not charge any fees might need to come around and realize that even if they don't want to charge fees, maybe they're responsible for an equal amount of fundraising on their end to sort of carry their weight, taking into consideration equity concerns. So if there's a community that is sort of very low income and they want to start their village, we will have sort of a progressive approach to how do we make sure that people do have skin in the game, but not burden them in ways that they're not realistic. In terms of membership, I think that we haven't reached a conclusion, but my feeling is that we'll have to reach some kind of an agreement on price points that everybody will feel okay with. Maybe some village will find that they need to charge less, some village might need to find more. Maybe we will keep things as they are, but each village will agree to say, okay, a certain percentage of hub operation is going to be our responsibility, and we choose how we bring that money to the table. So I want to respect the way people want to do things while being equitable. So if one village was really robust and has a lot of resources, another village that is in a very affluent community does not want to participate financially, then that's their choice. If they have the capability and there's some costs associated with that, then you need to have what I call the skin in the game. I want to, yeah.
For some reason, my hand won't go up. It just allows me to recognize everybody else's hands. As a longtime student of institution building, I studied the European unity movement and how they brought the European nations together. And my thought is
great parallel. Just don't mention Brexit.
Is say from the beginning that you're doing this in phases, and be very clear about what the first year might bring.
Yeah.
And what the next year might bring.
Yeah.
And make sure that the first year is a really low threshold.
Yeah.
And that people can say, oh, I can see a benefit of this.
Yeah.
And that's the way, because you said it's psychological, and it is, but that takes time.
Yeah.
The psychological and the cultural stuff is always the hardest.
Yeah.
And you've got to bring people along.
So what I'd like to, I hear you, and I'd like to suggest that both Sue and Claire and Mary Jo, that you participate in our conceptualization, right, and bring your thought process to the table. Mm-hmm. Because I think the more thoughtful individuals who understand the inner workings of all the different villages can bring their input into it, then we would have a better product. Mm-hmm. And so I'm anticipating a lot of back and forth, and it's going to be, I think, not easy, reach a point where everybody agrees or are comfortable with it. And I'm sure there'd be some points where people say, well, I'm not comfortable with this, I'm comfortable with that. So about creating that, I mean, the word consensus is a bit too ambitious, I think, for this process, but at least the majority of people who are able to gravitate towards some kind of a process as you suggest, or Sue, if you have some thoughts about that. I mean, I just want to be clear about this. It's not that I'm coming with an agenda, then I need to convince people to join. I think it's the other way around. I think you guys need to say, okay, do you want to join? Yes. In what way would you be okay with joining? And then your input helps shape the process, so that it really, the ownership is on all of us in articulating a process that would make sense.
Right.
And I guarantee you there'll be people who will not be happy. I mean, there is no doubt in my mind that people would leave meeting and say, oh my God, this is so not what I want to do. But I urge everybody to keep an open mind and speak their mind as well, so that whatever we have is sort of the most integrated approach that takes into consideration all these different perspectives.
And just to pick up on the specific point that that Silver Spring was making, and I know that the larger villages have been thinking about, they look at DC Village that shares a social worker. I think that the process in Montgomery County has to be open to considering types of shared services that were not on the original, thinking
Yep.
plan. And how would we introduce new shared functions? You need, this is called governance, it's setting up the governance of this, which is both a tiered and a sequential development. So
Yeah, and
any other
I
questions
will
on
say, I
this?
want to respond to Sue about this. We are actually starting as soon as the position is filled, the ARPA, so it's the American Rescue Plan, that the Older American Act, it's under Older American funding, funneled through state to local county government, is at our disposal until the end of fiscal year 24, which means September 24. We currently have money to hire a shared care manager. The position is open. I just have the description. I'm going to share that with people in villages so that we can then begin to promote that. It's a term limit because it's grant funded. If that works, I think it would be a good thing to transition to the hub. So we will then be able to demonstrate the efficacy and incorporate that into the planning of hub operations.
Thank you, Marie from North Chase.
Yeah, one of the things that I would really like to hear, Pazit, is the fact that I know you're admitting that, well, not everybody is going to be happy with the way things are going. But I think in order to keep the villager movement more collaborative, like what we are going to hear about from the other presenter, I think we need to have more involvement. What I'm hearing is that there will be at the hub, there will be, people doing jobs, admin people doing, executive functions. But I'm not hearing that there's going to be a collaborative body with representation from all of the villages to provide input to that hub. And I think that's the piece that's missing. And that's the piece that is making a lot of us mistrust what's happening.
So I didn't get into the details, but essentially the structure that we're planning for the hub is the board of the hub will be comprised of leaders from the different spokes. In other words, this is not a separate entity from the villages. It's exactly that collaborative leadership model, which would then guide the operations of the hub. So that is a really important piece. If a village does not want to send leadership to the board, we need to decide whether they will require it. Maybe there's some rotation, but the expectation is precisely that the leadership of the entire entity is in the hands of the participating villages and no one else. Does that answer your question? We didn't get into that because there were so many details to provide, but that's a critical component of the plan. And there's
exactly that's critical. It's that it's that collaborative trust model.
Yep.
And I think that's what's been missing.
Yep. And I think also, hold on, Rita. In the same spirit of collaboration, I was just talking to another hub and spoke leader just a couple of days ago. And what she said is really remarkable that happens is she is an executive director. Let's say one village is faced with a challenge. Let's say they've lost a critical person with knowledge around volunteer management. It is so easy for her to then do a little work group and rope in other villages who have already great volunteer manager in place, so they can then train up that person and they provide that sort of backup support until that village is able to find their individual and get them up to speed. So she has found the value of that collaboration you're mentioning happen on so many levels, just in terms of like day-to-day troubleshooting and figuring stuff out, as well as backstopping when village is struggling with one point or the other.
I was going to ask you to clarify one point that I think is important. You as a county employee are spearheading this movement, and there is money to your agency, your office to do this and to get it started. To what extent, explain, as I recall you once said, that what you would intend to do is set up an independent nonprofit Is that correct? Or would
Correct.
this hub always be a contractual arm of the Montgomery County government?
It's not an either or, because many villages as nonprofits organization are contractors of county government. Silver Spring is a contractor of county government, as are 11 other villages who are receiving funds. So they are our contractors. So that doesn't negate the fact that I think there is a need for establishing a new nonprofit, which would then serve as the umbrella organization. And perhaps the step-by-step approach, Mary Jo, I would really love it if you could participate, so you can help us with some good suggestion on how to create those steps. That my worry about steps, and I think that's the finesse of the process, would be, I don't want to get stuck in a step that doesn't yield enough benefits and then dissuades people from moving forward. So in other words, it's that fine balance between creating those steps in such a way that are both gradual and yet efficacious, so that people see the value of staying on. And I think it's a matter of us all bringing our brain power and creating these structure together, so that it's not, again, I am spearheading this because it's something that I think would benefit villages, but it's not county own initiative. And that, I think, is the crux of it. I'm helping to facilitate a conversation rather than saying this is a county initiative. County wants you to step at a hub and spoke. This sentence is not correct. This is county wants to support villages, figure out how they move on. Perhaps the hub and spoke would be a good solution. Yes, we have some funding. It's short term. It's not a lot. I don't think it's going to be enough. I think that, like all villages, a diversified fundraising approach would be most appropriate. We have great fundraising ability within the villages. They already have some funding mechanisms. We have county grants. We have foundations that would love to support this kind of initiative. So I think that it would be like a combination of monies. And I think that it's important to know that even though I think county would love to see it happen, county cannot own this financially. While I applaud the DC government for giving a whooping $800,000, that's pretty amazing. Maybe we'll get there. I mean, it's up to you guys. It's really up to you. If we set up a thing and say, yeah, you guys, look at DC, they're getting all this money. We want it too, but we need to be able to demonstrate our efficacy and say, here's what we're delivering for these $800,000.
Well, that's
And I think we can get there. Again, it's this gradual process.
That's a very good segue. How about questions for about the DC project and how it works? I don't know, Pazit, maybe you have some questions for Denise, in terms of how they got there. So
How did you get so much money?
Right, yeah. So questions for about the DC collaboration. I guess that's my question. Well, I had a different question first, which is many of us know that among the pain points for villages, especially those with staff, with paid staff, is the relationship between the board and the executive director. And your collaboration now includes both. And you say that there's great trust and there's great openness. And so I'd like you to talk to the point of was there any gradual approach that you needed to take at the beginning to overcome what, at least maybe in a few villages or even just one village, that the ED and the board president weren't working as good a team as could have been desired?
Well, a couple of things, I guess. First of all, when I was talking about the tremendous amount of trust and openness, willingness to share, et cetera, I was talking about the group of executive directors who have been meeting together by themselves for quite a few years now. The process of bringing executive directors and staff, the executive directors and presidents together has worked at, the same level of trust and knowledge and whatever between presidents and EDs as a total group of 26 is not as strong as it was just among the 13 executive directors. But I think the way folks have been brought along whether their issue was, that the ED and the board president weren't working well together, or, a myriad of other issues. I think what made a difference was that the process has been very slow, and the process has been totally collaborative. Open to anybody to participate at any given level, always using a mix of executive directors and presidents, and the guidance of our, well, I call her our facilitator, but she prefers a guide. The competency that she has in group dynamics and, just keeping the process up where it needs to be and not getting lost in the weeds. I think all of that has been really important.
Okay, you're doing certainly, very good work. And since I know there is interest in Montgomery County about, say, a shared case manager, a shared social worker that Pazit is in the process of setting up, is there one village, I think there is, that sort of manages that case manager, so to speak, or not? As a case manager, just have direct links to each and every village?
Are you asking that question of me for our
Yes.
shared case manager?
Yeah.
Originally, there was, two villages that probably worked more closely with Barbara, our shared case manager, because until fairly recently, she did not have her LICSW. She just was, had her graduate degree, but was not fully licensed. So she was supervised by the executive director of Northwest Neighbors Village. So there was a direct relationship there. She is also sort of housed out of another village, DuPont Circle. However, I don't believe her relationship with DuPont is any different than the other of us. I think there are 7 of us now that share her, and she relates individually to each village. She has an MOU with each village she works with. And, each of us have a contract with her that is separate.
Thank you. Any other questions for Denise? Okay, Eddie? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, Eddie first and then Sarah.
Yeah, Denise, I know you guys, to your credit, the 13 of you were able to get together to really advocate for that big chunk of change that the AAA gives you guys. How realistic is it that that's going to remain in the DC budget for quite a few years? Part of my concern about always talking about public monies is there's never a guarantee those public monies are going to last. And I fear that, at least here in Montgomery County, the way I hear some people talk, there's the expectation that the county's always going to have money for villages. And I just don't want us to become dependent on any one stream. So just the question to you, how secure do you feel, and what are you guys doing about it?
Well, I think we're very secure in the near term. I would not want to project 5 or 10 years down the road. I think the potential volatility of government funding is always something in the back of our minds. I think we've done a very good job in advocating for us and showing the impact that the village has and the distinctions between what we're able to do and what other government funded agencies in DC are doing. But I think the other thing that we've been smart about is that we are always trying to pay attention to what DACL's priorities are, and to find ways to show that we are supporting DACL's priorities. Obviously, if they decided they wanted to start childcare centers, we're not going to do mission creep, but we do try to make sure we're incorporating that and make it clear to DACL that we're working on those things as well, because the more we make DACL look good, the more money they're going to get and the more likely they'll be continuing to fund us.
Sarah, you had a question?
I did, yes. So I'm with Mount Vernon at home, and we recently finished a very extensive strategic planning process. And I guess my question for you, Denise, is with the collaboration between the EDs and the board presidents, is that the strategic planning of the DC villages? Is there any sort of connection to that? Are you looking at maybe a broader strategic plan, or are you still kind of in, your own realm when it comes to each village doing their own strategic plan?
Well, each village needs to do their own strategic planning and operating planning. Because the collaborative is not in any way going to take over the jobs of the individual villages. We're at this point very clear about that. So the strategic planning that's being done by the collaborative is about what our goals and vision is for the collaborative as a whole. Individual villages will probably have some goals that are parallel to or consistent with the collaborative's goals, but they will also have some that aren't included in the collaborative's strategic plans. So yes, I think both have to happen.
Sarah, I didn't hear the village that you're with.
Mount Vernon at home.
Mount Vernon.
With Dave Prescott.
Right. Thank you. Welcome. Okay. Any other questions for Pazit or for Denise, or any other just open comments? Well, I have one. And again, I guess it gets to that thought that sort of popped into my head on the spot about a staged approach, say in Montgomery County. Because I will be very candid. And as Elizabeth knows, I reached out personally to her over a year ago. And I said that I, from a personal point of view, not from a Wingate Village point of view and not from a WAVE point of view, was interested in sort of the hub and spokes, model, say for Bethesda. And I wasn't wedded to it. And back then there was no, talk about Montgomery County doing it. But I wondered, and this is a think aloud, which I do all too often and not always very productively. But my think aloud is whether it could be valuable for smaller subgroups of villages in Montgomery County to coalesce like Bethesda. Again, I'm not sure it is. I'm not advocating it, but because I thought of it before Montgomery County was considering it, I'm just wondering, do people see that you could build from the bottom up around smaller sorts of collaborations?
Mary Jo, I would argue that the Rockville Area Village Exchange has kind of done that to a degree. But again, they too have been dependent on Montgomery County monies. So I don't know. Pazit?
If villages want to coalesce in one way or the other, I think it's their prerogative to do so. The hubs and spoke I spoke with all told me that geographical sort of contiguous boundaries are not necessary for a successful hub and spoke operations. I think for us, the way to go would be to start with those who want to participate and not exclude groups that might not be in close proximity to one another. But again, I want to facilitate a process, but not say this is not Montgomery County once. This is Montgomery County villages coming together, figuring stuff out. The disadvantage of coalescing around contiguous boundaries would then how that affect equity, and how are we making ourselves available to neighborhoods and parts of the county that might not have existing capacity. We will be putting them at further disadvantage potentially. So rather than the stronger village in the Bethesda area lending some of their strength to communities in the Aspen Hill area that are currently struggling to start up, or further up county, we would be maybe leaving them to fend for themselves potentially. Having said that, I really want, I come out of a place of respect. I might have some opinions, maybe I'll voice them one way or the other. I don't feel like my voice is the determinant in this conversation. I think this is a Montgomery County Village initiative, and they all need to come together as a group.
I hope people will excuse a little point of levity here. I just couldn't help thinking. So we are the Washington Area Villages Exchange. We are WAVE. You have the Rockville Area Villages Exchange, which is Brave, right? And I'm thinking maybe the DC villages are going to be Dave. Couldn't resist. Couldn't resist.
I think that's really such a good point, because Mary Jo, once the nonprofit is started, however direction it takes, it is not beholden to county boundaries. I mean, I don't see any hindrance for greater collaboration if that becomes a good opportunity. I'm not saying why we're one or the other, but we don't need to be closed in boxes.
No, I certainly know, Bazit, and I think we all do, that you have been open and collaborative and never top down, that you work by bringing people together. So I think, as you say, the challenge is to those of us certainly who took the time to get to this group, you know, to join your next meeting and to make sure that we help by just bringing ideas together. Any other thoughts? Okay, Eddie?
But by the same token, and again, I don't mean to put Bazit on the spot, but if it wasn't that we had Bazit as our convener here in the county, I don't believe, and I could be wrong, and the rest of you from Montgomery County can throw things at me, but I don't believe we would be near as organized as we are without Bazit's leadership. DC, you guys did a great job, given that you were 13 villages that brought your heads together and started doing things together. I don't think we have 13 villages in Montgomery County who could do that on their own without Bazit. So
Maybe if I wasn't there, things would just happen. Maybe I'm the hindrance.
No,
I'm leaving, everybody.
no,
I
you're
am done. Goodbye. Enough enabling.
no. Let's hear it for Bazit.
Levity. I'm sorry. I'm
Yay,
going on
Bazit,
Mary
yay,
Jo's
Bazit,
joke.
yay,
It was
Bazit.
just a
actually,
joke.
though, but again, there has been talk about Maryland villages trying to get together.
Yeah.
You know, the people on the Eastern Shore, the people up in the Baltimore area. And again, how do we manage all that? I would love to see all of those join WAVE, but geography can make a difference. So we're not sure.
Well, one thing I want to really endorse that Bazit has said, and it gets back to the sort of staged approach, which is lasting institutions usually grow organically.
Yeah.
They rarely last if they are totally, if they are put into creation like this with a big bang. Well, remember the Big Bang, actually, I love cosmology. It actually started teeny tiny too, you know, and then maybe it is a good analogy. And then, you know, you had clumps of gases that formed and they all swirled around and they became planets and stars and all of that. So I think that if we want, if anybody wants in DC or Virginia or Maryland or whatever wants to do it, like taking that approach of perhaps allowing certain conglomerates to naturally form, but whatever it is, input is very, very important.
So long as we don't turn into a black hole, I think I'm okay with it.
That's right. But we'll find our North Star and we'll all look toward the North Star. There we go. Oh my. Okay, how about from anyone else in the group who hasn't had a chance to talk? We've got 5 minutes left. And we'd love to just hear even your reaction to what you've heard. I mean, Bradley Hills, what does this sound like to you? I know you've been thinking about a lot of stuff these days, these years.
These days. Well, Betsy Carrier has been working with Bazit on this, so it's kind of, and she's our new president for next year. So I think we have a lot of discussions, as you know. I think there's personally what I think, and there's the board, what they think. And I think the more we discuss this, the more we throw out options, the more we brainstorm, the better it'll be. I don't think we would be here without as Montgomery County's support. And I think, you know, I think offering more support to other villages is important. And I also think piggybacking on one another, as we are a developed village, but we're still pretty small. But it's also important that our board brainstorms with us, and that's hard to bring our board in. I'm here,
Good.
but I'm glad Betsy will be there.
Okay, how about Marie? Are you signing off, or did you have any thoughts here about any of all this? I think she's.
I'm going to go ahead and sign off now. I have grandma duties to attend to.
Oh, good for you.
No.
Good for you.
I
Okay.
got to meet the school bus.
Okay, well, good for you. How about you, Fran Randolph? I mean, do you have any thoughts on all of this? You're mute?
She says she has no sound, so she can,
Oh,
she
okay, I
can
can
hear,
see.
but
Okay, okay,
okay.
thank you. Anyone else there? We have Margaret, we have Jason. Jason, I think if you're who do you have some thoughts? I think you're from Fairfax though, actually, right?
Yes, I'm just absorbing all this information. It's nice to know there's all these villages that are working together or trying to work more together. And I've been at it for a year, and sometimes I feel like I'm in a bubble, but it's always nice to know that there's this big network, or the WAVE network out there. I think this is my first meeting, WAVE meeting. So I'm listening right now, and my wisdom will come soon, but not today. Okay.
Hi, this is Linda. I'm texting with Fran, and I just asked her to send me her question because I can share it with the group if people could be patient for a minute.
I will say I have a 12 o'clock. I will need to sign off in a minute so that I can get to my EBGBs out.
Okay, quick. Did you have a quick, Fran? Does Fran have a quick question?
I'm not getting it.
No, she
I think
can't.
she's typing.
Okay, well, we don't want Pazit to be late. So Pazit, we can thank you now for everything. And then I think we can we can hang out for a little bit if we want to, but I do want to thank Pazit and let her go prep for yet another meeting because that's what she does, and she does it so well. And thank you for all the time that you've given us today and that you've given us for the past several years.
I really appreciate everybody's thought. What I love most about villages is you all. I think I just summarize it pretty much.
Thank you. Okay, so the rest of us can hang out for a minute or more if we want. If there's any discussion that you want to all bring up, we don't all need to have to sign off. So any last questions, comments, ideas?
No.
A point of just a historical perspective when we were talking during the broader meeting about boards and board leaders and staff getting together. I have to tell you that it was at the second WAVE conference in Philadelphia back in 2000.
WAVE or V2V?
I'm sorry, V2V. V2V back in 2010. I believe it was 2009 or 10, that I observed one of our DC villages, and the individuals that I'm referring to are no longer active participants. But there was a board president and an executive director at that meeting. And when the village was asked a question, the executive director stood up to answer the question, and this was in the broader audience. And the board president, to me, rudely stood up and stopped her from answering and answered themselves. And I remember observing that. And at the time, I was working for AARP. And so I was already interested in villages, but was just watching and trying to learn, trying to figure out how I could get AARP more involved. And when I saw that happen, and then came back to Washington, and that's when WAVE started. And I attended a WAVE meeting. I went to the founders immediately and said, when you do breakout groups, you need to have opportunities for paid staff to meet and volunteer leaders to meet, and keep them separate so they can have their private conversations and learn how to work individually first and then start blending it. So I'm glad to hear that DC has even started blending it again. But I was taken aback, and for a couple of years, I watched those tensions, and that's always been something that from a distance I kept eyes on. So just a point of historical perspective.
Yes, yes, indeed. Any other thoughts? Well, then we can adjourn almost right exactly on time. And I really thank everyone for participating. And again, we will be saving the videos. We will be posting videos and materials that were presented on our website. Go to Archive of Wave Events and look it up. And even more important, if you are not already helping Wave in some capacity, why we hope you will. Eddie, you've given at the office time and time again, you know, but we'd love to hear from the rest of you anytime. So thank you and have a very good afternoon. And I wish you all great success with your villages.
Good meeting.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, how do I stop my recording? I did a recording and it may still be going on of my breakout group. What do I do to stop it?
Do you see the record button at the bottom?